Yo, welcome to Simply Bitcoin. The country with a $570 billion GDP made their next move into Bitcoin. However, this is not the first time the Middle Eastern giant has made a Bitcoin play. And the country we're going to be talking about today isn't the only Middle Eastern country making Bitcoin plays. In fact, it's happening across that entire area. Is this a sign that these Middle Eastern oil giants are losing faith in the petrodollar system? Perhaps. And they think Bitcoin is a hedge or even the next global currency. Let's see. Let's find out today. Anyways, we have a hell of a panel with us today. We have David Branscombe. He's a Bitcoin energy consultant. And of course, our co-host here at Simply Bitcoin, the one and only Chris Alamo. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, no more delay. Let's jump straight into it. Here is the CoinDesk article. UAE exempts crypto transactions from value-added tax. It goes on to say the United Arab Emirates has exempted crypto transactions from paying the VAT, bringing the industry into line with several traditional financial services. The change, which takes effect November 15th, applies retrospectively to transactions from as far back as June 1st, 2018. You never see that from governments, right? The Arabic version of the Federal Tax Authority update was made public on October 2nd, 2024. The English translation was made public on October 4th, 2024. The exemption makes clear for the first time that the tax doesn't apply to digital assets. It covers the exchange of and transfer of ownership of those assets, which means all cryptocurrency transfers and conversions will now be exempt from paying the 5% levy. This is absolutely massive. And the reason for that is that's in stark contrast with how it's in stark contrast with how it works here in the United States or in Europe, where you're actually, even if you're sending Bitcoin to someone else, you actually have to pay the capital gain on that transaction, on that transfer, which is absolutely nuts. But this is kind of like the theory from the sovereign individual playing out, right? Where you have different jurisdictions all over the world kind of competing in a way. And they're basically trying to attract entrepreneurs. They're trying to attract people to move to the city or the country. This is why you have so many people moving to Dubai, because of their favorable tax laws. And I think this is just another step in the right direction. And when governments compete for your business as an individual, you as an individual win. Anyways, more data to back up this point. The UAE being one of the fastest growing digital asset markets in the world, research suggests that year on year, the number of daily crypto traders has risen by 166%, reflective of an overall climb in regional adoption. It's estimated between 27 to 31% of UAE residents have invested into digital assets. Among this active pool of crypto investors, nearly 3/4 are thought to have invested in Bitcoin. But it's not just UAE citizens and longstanding residents who are driving the state of the crypto economy. It includes new expats who have flocked to the UAE for its safety and protection in the midst of political and economic upheaval in other parts of the world, not to mention the fact of its favorable tax codes. Isn't it crazy? Like a small little city, right? Where they don't have income tax, but they provide more safety and they protect not only the rule of law, they enforce the rule of law, but also they protect private property rights more than countries that have higher income taxes. What's the value add there, right? I think it's a very interesting question. Anyways, but it's not also the tax situation. The UAE investment entities to monetize flared gas to power AI, blockchain, and Bitcoin data centers. It goes on to say, Hodler Investments, a Dubai-based firm with a portfolio in energy, AI, and digital asset mining, has signed a strategic partnership with Abu Dhabi's EHC Investment. Together, they will launch NextGen, a product aimed at monetizing wasted energy like flared gas to power data centers in the UAE, KSA, and Egypt. And also, last but not least as well, Of course, you have the Bitcoin conference. They're most well known for the Bitcoin conference that they throw in the United States. They're about to have one in Amsterdam, which I'll be at. Hopefully I get to see some of you guys there. They're actually doing one in the Middle East. I believe this is going to be the biggest Bitcoin conference in the Middle East ever. Of course, there's been crypto conference, but not Bitcoin only conferences. It's going to be called Bitcoin MENA. It's going to be hosted in Abu Dhabi, December 9th through the 10th. So I'm very, very bullish about Bitcoin in the Middle East, and for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the Middle East is known for having a vast amount of energy, the favorable tax laws, and also the respect for private property rights, and the law and order, specifically in the smaller countries like Qatar, and the UAE, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. So very bullish on the Middle East. Anyways, David, your background is energy. Your background is mining. Are these just journalists writing puff pieces? What's actually going on there? Are you optimistic about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in the Middle East?
Well, it's there's plenty of evidence, out there. I mean, you've got the Marathon project, a pretty large immersion project that they're working with the Sovereign Wealth Fund over there. There's I'm working on a couple projects that would be working with different countries directly with the government, right, to take advantage of that flare gas. If you zoom out, if you zoom way out, right, and we're looking at civilization as a whole, for the most part, we've always had to basically set up our lives around, where there was water, food, vegetation, for shelter, things like that, right? And you're seeing this really interesting shift now through Bitcoin. Now that we have that attachment to the energy, and we can immediately convert it into a store of value, whatever you believe as far as argument, if it's money, if it's not money, whatever, digital gold, you can immediately change that power directly into a store of value or a medium of exchange. And so we're seeing this huge shift to places like, we're seeing it in West Texas. So I'm in Texas. We're seeing it in West Texas as well, right? Like, so West Texas is kind of like that. It's barren. It's kind of a desert for a lot of the part of the country, right? So it takes a lot of resources to make anything grow there, or to make people move out there. But you see this shift now. We're going to congregate around power, right? The businesses are going to move to power. They're going to move towards the energy source, because it is now such an integral part of our lives, whether it be Bitcoin, whether it be AI, whether it be just general, traditional data centers, whatever the case may be, mission critical data centers. Everybody's moving closer and closer to the power, right? So it'll start with the cowboys that are mining Bitcoin, and then it'll move to the more traditional, kind of business focused, publicly traded miners, things like that, right? And then the data centers will come in. You see, companies like what was it, HUD 8, right? They start to kind of push more towards the AI focus. They're trying to kind of hedge their bets, go different multiple directions, right? So you're seeing that happen, and a place like Dubai is perfect for it, because it's all about order. It's all about control. It's all about you're still free, right? But it's like they don't put up with shenanigans, right?
Yeah.
They don't deal with that.
So,
and they are also they've always been, I say always, right? Since they really started rebuilding the city about 15, 20 years ago, right? I actually sold a crane to a company in Dubai back when they had like 80% of all of the cranes in the world, right? So this was like 20 years ago. But ever since they started that, they have been so focused on technology and innovation, and they've got the money, they've got oil, they've got this energy available. It's nice to see them start really, really pushing and using it, and it's great to see that part of the world is consolidating to those core values, right? All these people are coming in because they want that order. We're seeing a really good swing, and countries like that they're going to lead the way.
100%. And you're seeing this kind of regulatory arbitrage kind of play out in the United States, where people are leaving California, New York. They're going to Texas and Florida. Of course, freedom country, tremendous amount of people immigrating to El Salvador in the Middle East. But you buried the lead there in the very beginning. You mentioned the fact that some of these countries' sovereign wealth funds are actively mining Bitcoin. That is not a well-known fact. Of
Yeah.
course, we know the Kingdom of Bhutan. We know El Salvador is mining Bitcoin. Of course, we know Texas, huge amount of Bitcoin miners there. But David, I don't know if you could say any of the specifics, but that's absolutely massive. You just confirmed that some countries in the Middle East, their governments themselves are mining Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting, right? Because of this shift, you think about the petrodollar you mentioned earlier, right in the opening, right? You're talking about, you've got BRICS, you've got all these things happening, right? There's this kind of struggle to move off the dollar, and realistically, you know, right now a barrel of oil, right, there's a billion barrels of oil used a day, and that's not even counting like all of the natural gas that comes from that for power generation and stuff, and heat and stuff like that. So you're like, that is a massive industry that just dwarfs the Bitcoin market cap right now, right? So as cool and innovative and as amazing as Bitcoin is, and as revolutionary as it is, it's still in its infancy compared to the energy market, right? So those guys over there are doing that, but it's still a rounding error for them, right? I mean, they could be making a couple $1 billion mining, or a value, right? Mining Bitcoin right now, the country could, and it's still a rounding error for most of those countries where oil and gas is their primary export, right? We're talking about, a few $1 trillion worth of, a few $1 trillion worth of energy. Bitcoin's just a rounding error. So are they doing it? Yeah, absolutely. I think they'd be silly not to. I mean, I can't tell you a specific about the project I'm working on, that conversation, but it'll start slowly. It'll start with someone, basically a Bitcoin miner, Marathon went in there and partnered. That's all public
That's
information, right?
huge.
That was big. And then other countries will be like, okay, well, we've got all this excess, gas that we are either flaring or we try to send it to, but you talk about, there's a lot of geopolitical issues there that kind of make it advantageous for Bitcoiners, right? You talk about consolidating from one state in the US to another based on, regulations. That happens all over the world every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
All over Europe, people are like, well, I don't, like what's going on in Germany, so I'm going to move to Switzerland, or I don't like what's happening here, so I'm going to, it's like, it's not that big a deal because it's basically the size, or even a little smaller, whatever, of the US, right? So it's like, you're really just moving from state to state. It's happening in the Middle East too. People will get, displaced for, geopolitical reasons, for religious persecution or whatever, and it moves, and they will naturally gravitate to these places. Well, the ones that are early adopting Bitcoin, you mentioned El Salvador, Bhutan, right? They are ahead of the game. And so
100%.
the rest of the world outside of those countries start to see that, it's that old story of, what was it? I can't remember if it was Spain or France or whatever, where they started taxing everybody and then the boats left, right? Because
it's the sovereign individual thesis playing out,
yeah,
and because of the internet, you can now work from anywhere. And I'm just connecting the dots here, right? You have ExxonMobil using flared gas to mine Bitcoin in the United States. You just confirmed that Marathon signed a deal with a Middle Eastern country, and of course, we have BitDeer that signed a deal with the Kingdom of Bhutan in Asia.
right.
To think that trend is not going to continue is just naive.
Yeah.
And this is just going to continue to make the hash rate go through the roof like it has been, which means that Bitcoin theoretically is more computationally secure, which means that its value proposition continues to go up. Yeah, I mean, all things are good for Bitcoin. Starting the week off strong. Chris Alamo, what are your thoughts before we get on to the numbers?
Yeah, so David, I kind of want to touch on what you were saying. Obviously, in 1971, France requested their gold out of Fort Knox, and then England followed suit shortly afterwards. Do you guys remember when the Nixon shock was? Obviously in 71.
1971, yeah.
1971. Do you know when UAE was founded?
1971, 2, 3.
Correct. 4 months after the Nixon shock. Yep. So August 15th, 1970.
Let's go.
Yeah. So 1971, August 15th of 1971, the Nixon shock occurred. December 2nd of 1971, the UAE was founded as a nation. Obviously, if you can see, obviously we became on the petrodollar system. So a big part of this system was obviously, backing dollars by gold. That was nixed. And then basically the Secretary of State at the time went over to the Middle East, mainly Saudi Arabia and its proxies, and basically said, hey, we're going to support you with weapons and protection, but you have to sell oil and gas or energy in US dollars. And that's kind of the system that we've had ever since then. Obviously, we've seen, and I think a lot of those countries in the Middle East have had a firsthand witness, or, they've seen obviously since 9/11, right after that, and when basically the US government was confiscating reserves. So the deal was basically, we're going to send you dollars or we're going to send you like protection, basically, or the military in order to protect yourself. And then you're going to use those and you're only going to sell in US dollars. And then with your excess US dollar reserves, aside from pumping more wells or, running your businesses, you're going to plow them into US treasuries. That's kind of been the game, or that we've been playing for the last 50 years or so. But the issues started to arise in 2001 when the US started confiscating assets of a lot of, whether they were in the right or wrong, but they were confiscating assets of Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden. Then we saw, even as recently as 2022, we sanctioned Russia. Russia had about $1 trillion outstanding in treasuries. China in 2008 was pissed when we bailed out the bankers, but we didn't bail out bondholders. So China was holding well over $1 trillion in reserves. So there's been the cracking of the financial system, and people are looking for a different asset, an apolitical asset, such as Bitcoin, in order to pump their money into. Saudi Arabia has been at the forefront of, they're receiving dollars, and they're like, these can be taken from us. So we need to find a better, more suitable asset that we can hold on. We have our oil reserves, and obviously we have, they've really been pumping up the economy through tourism and, welcoming businesses there. But they're like, hey, we need a reserve asset in the case that our banks are shut down. So I'll just leave you guys there with that. I hope that's good.
100. That's an amazing take. And we see it in the comments too. Dumbest move is confiscating assets in Russia. Of course, because the moment and to add to Chris's points, the moment that they politicize the money, all of a sudden, other countries that are using and holding US dollars are saying, wait a second, what's stopping one administration from doing the same thing to me? And then they start looking for alternatives. And of course, the best alternative, as we all know, is the only truly non-decentralized, non-sovereign money, which is Bitcoin, that can't be politicized. You could transact. You're gonna have to be okay with even your worst enemies using it, but I would say that's a feature and not a bug. Anyways, guys, before we jump into the show, I do want to shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada and the USA. To get started, all you got to do is you go to bitcoinwell.com, you put in your email address. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to get signed up. And this is what makes Bitcoin Well different. It's completely non-custodial, meaning as soon as you make the purchase and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Plus, when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you could use those points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest, which we'll do for you guys right now for free. Get your Lightning wallets ready. First person to scan the QR code wins 500 sats. The jackpot is up to 1 million Satoshi. So every time you flip a coin into the Bitcoin Wishing Well, you have an opportunity to win up to 1 million Satoshis. If you use promo code SimplyBTC, again, SimplyBTC, to sign up to BitcoinWell.com today, you get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin Wishing Well, absolutely free. All right, everybody, let's hit the numbers. Lots to talk about. All right, everybody, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Stampseed. Usually when you buy a hardware wallet, it comes with a piece of paper and you're meant to write down your seed words on that piece of paper. Problem is that paper is prone to water damage, fire damage. Your dog's not going to eat it. Your dog's probably going to eat it. Maybe he'll eat it. The point is that that's not the right way to store your generational wealth, which is why we recommend the Stampseed. Literally stamp your seed into a plate of titanium, which is going to stand the test of time. Your dog's probably not going to want to eat a plate of titanium. They've put a blowtorch on this thing. They've dumped it in salt water, and the seed words, the data survived. It comes with everything you need to stamp your seed in the privacy of your own home into a plate of titanium. It comes with a hammer, comes with the letter stamping tools. It comes with the anvil, comes with everything. This is the proper way to store your generational wealth. Head over to stampseed.com today to get started and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is 63,830. Sats per dollar, 1,567. Block height, 864,623. Realized monetary inflation, 1.32%. Market cap, 1.26 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 6.79%. Money supply, 19,764,230 BTC. Percentage issued, 94.11%. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this is Simply Bitcoin, and we cover not only the separation of money and state, but also the separation of information and state, and they go hand in hand. What the internet has enabled people to do is not only choose what money they want to use, but it's also allowed them to talk amongst themselves at a massive scale, mass scale, peer-to-peer communications. And unfortunately, for governments that have been used to controlling the narrative through a handful of legacy media outlets, it becomes very, very uncomfortable when you have people building massive followings not going through the traditional gatekeepers of information, like the New York Times, like the Wall Street Journal, like CNN, like Fox News, right? You have the rise of independent content creators that are now becoming more popular than the legacy media itself. And of course, you have people the likes of which of Hillary Clinton, and of course, former Secretary of State John Kerry, who ran for president, basically saying things like, yeah, social media is a problem. The First Amendment is a problem, right? So I'm going to play you guys this clip of Hillary Clinton talking about social media. Let's check it out.
There should be a lot of things done. We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. There should be a lot of things.
If we don't censor, moderate, or control the content, we lose total control. I mean, like, wait a second. So that has me asking so many questions, right? Like, what do you mean control? Is that the role of government, to control the narrative and control the content? Isn't that specifically what the First Amendment is all about? Well, there's a breakdown. Mike Benz, who originally kind of revealed this, he did an amazing interview on Tucker Carlson. And here's his response to this Hillary Clinton interview. I have been put here on God's green earth, sent here from the future to tell you that this is the current consensus policy pivot of every major organ of the U.S. State Department. And states programming is specifically designed to achieve total control. I don't think that was the original vision of what the United States was built upon, right? And Gigi has a really good point, and you can find this on Nostr, of course. And this is why protocols like Nostr are so important, because there is no centralized platform. So even if they passed whatever law they want, they couldn't take the information down, which inevitably becomes a forcing function to, instead of censoring what your political opponent is saying, you have to address it. It's a lot easier to censor for tyrants. Anyways, it goes on to say, Gigi, who defines hate? Who defines truth? All centralized platforms will inevitably be forced to be an arbiter, willingly or not. It's an impossible problem. The only solution is to remove central control and push it to the edges. It's messy, it's imperfect, but it's much more preferable to the alternative. And just a little bit of commentary in regards to how the First Amendment works here in the United States. I think the founding fathers had the wisdom to understand this when they wrote the First Amendment the way they did, because they realized, like, if we give the power to government to get to dictate what is truth and what is not truth, they are going to abuse that in order to protect their political moat. So we kind of have to leave this up to the free market of ideas. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than the alternative? And I think that's the point that Gigi's trying to make. That's the wisdom that the founding fathers had in the First Amendment, the U.S. Constitution. And, you know, the internet, I think, is exposing a lot of things that they didn't want exposed. I think that they had this idea that they were always going to be able to control information through the legacy media outlets. I don't think in a million years did they ever think that social media was going to become more popular than the original outlets. Anyways, David, what are your thoughts on this?
Man, where do you start with this? Right, like it's. I mean, we're literally seeing, you know, commentary and narrative come out of the U.S. government. Well, we see it out of all governments across the planet right now. Most governments across the planet right now, right? It's straight out of, you know, Orwell's 1984, right? It's Bitcoin ties into this in so many interesting ways, but I think the main point is it really does come down to freedom of speech, right? And because freedom of speech, the reason freedom of speech is so important is because it allows critical thinking. It allows you to make your own decisions. It allows you to create your own ideas and not follow, you know, just blindly follow orders, right? That was the whole point. We had just thrown off a tyrant. And if we had just basically taken a page out of that book and copied it into, you know, what is now the United States of America, then, you know, we would be no better off, right? It would have been just the same song, different verse. Freedom of speech is so important. The reason it ties into Bitcoin so well is because it is enabling us to make our own decisions and our own choices, not just say what we want to say, right? But actually saying, I want to put my value here. This is where I see my value, not just from a money perspective and a finance perspective, but, you know, I have value in my family. I have value in the way that I live. I have value in my personal beliefs. I have value in my, you know, my religion. All of this is freedom of speech, right? It's not just freedom of speech. It's freedom of think. It's your ability to actually decide on your own. That is absolutely goes against the ethos of a government, right? The government is, we get involved and we begin putting regulations on things and messing with your life, but it's for the greater good. It's so you're not harming other people, right? The problem is giving it that inch, right? It just rolls and it rolls and it rolls and it rolls and it rolls. And so, and you see it in every single government that's ever existed. Eventually, they always try to grab as much of that power as it possibly can. So things like the internet, things like Bitcoin, the ability, just peer-to-peer commerce, right? Me being able to go to a farmer's market, right? That's all tied into freedom of speech, right? And what's so scary about that is if they can control the speech, that's what they're saying. That's what she's saying when she says we will lose control. The we she's talking about is an elite class that is so ingrained in the U.S. government. They're now one and the same, right? They're not going to go away. We can't vote our way out of it, right? So something radically has to change. And that's the change she's talking about. If it keeps going, the way that it has been, and people like Elon Musk don't fight back with, you know, X, if the average person doesn't fight back, I I wrote out a tweet today that I was about to post, and I had just a split second where I wasn't sure if I wanted to put it up or not, right? That's a dangerous place to be at when you're actually frightened of what the repercussions are going to be. Now, you should always be willing to take accountability for your words, right? But what I'm saying is what I was going to quote and tweet was not, revolutionary. It was not crazy. It was not dangerous, but there's just enough people out there that might get upset about it, right? It made me think. And those, when I have those feelings, that's when it makes me realize that pendulum has swung way too far and that they are living rent free in my mind and trying to control my thoughts, right?
100%.
When you have to push so super hard to swing back, and the further you go, the harder it gets to fight that back.
100%. And by the way, David, you're not the only person that has made the case that that Bitcoin is protected by the First Amendment, or Bitcoin is speech. And here's Ross Stevens from NYDIG, and I think he's trying to get ahead of something from a regulatory standpoint. He has quotes from Benjamin Franklin, and I think the most important part here, and this is something that we've been making the case on Simply Bitcoin for a long time, actually, which is the fact that Bitcoin inherently is a political movement, right? And because it's a political movement, think about it. If you're not allowed to speak freely about certain ideas, there was a point in time that the legacy media was basically saying that when Bitcoiners were screaming on Bitcoin Twitter that inflation was coming because they printed a record amount of money, they called us psychopaths. That's their quote, not mine. And they said that was disinformation. Right. 2 years later, they said, oh no, we were wrong about inflation. At the time, though, it was disinformation. This is the dangerous part, right? Is that at the time they'll just take it off the internet. And I think this is where Ross Stevens is trying to get ahead from a regulatory perspective, saying, hey, Bitcoin is speech. Money is speech. And by the way, this is not just saying this. I love this article by Nayib Bukele, because they're basically saying exactly what David just said. And these are Nayib Bukele's words, not mine. They're willing to fight, lie, smear, destroy, censor, confiscate, print, and do whatever it takes to maintain and increase their control over the truth and everything and everyone, right? And he also makes the case that their most important, their most powerful weapon is the control of the truth. So when you hear Hillary Clinton literally saying at the very end,
we lose total control, there should be
she literally means that. She literally means that. Mass scale peer-to-peer communications enabled by the internet is not allowing them to control the narrative the way that they have been controlling the narrative. I'm going to pass it on to Chris one last bit. A very, very powerful tweet that I saw, and I actually said it at the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2023, I think. If social media existed back in the 2000s, we would have not gone to war with Iraq. And it was such a powerful statement, because the way that the American people were convinced about that war was that the New York Times released an article that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It came out half a decade later that information actually came from the intelligence agencies. Right. So it was it's nuts. And guys, make no mistake, the fight for free speech is the front line for the fight for Bitcoin. If they're not okay with you speaking freely, they're not going to be okay with you transacting freely. Anyways, passing it on to Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great clip. I mean, they're, the saying is always, they're the carbon you want to reduce. They're the speech you want to censor. And obviously, we're building tools to fight that. Bitcoin being the number one example, or the obvious example of the freedom to transact with peers in a peer-to-peer manner. And then I think platforms like Nostr, while I am really happy there's platforms like, Parler, Rumble, X, now that Elon has it, fighting to be more free speech platforms. I do think, as you can see, with Telegram, the CEO of Telegram, when they arrested him and they're trying to either force backdoors, things are being leaked that the program has leaked not encrypted communication since 2018. It's really sad to see. But I definitely think things like Nostr and Bitcoin are going to be things that fight back. That like once the total amount of pressure is applied to centralized platforms, it's going to be the decentralized platforms that win out in the long run. So that's all I got to add there.
100%. No, that's a really good point. I'm bullish on protocols, and I still got to give credit to Elon, because what he's doing is courageous. What the Rumble CEO is courageous doing was courageous. What the Telegram's CEO was doing was courageous. But as you can see, they're centralized platforms, so there is someone to go after, and this is how they contrast with Nostr and Bitcoin, where it's essentially there is no one to go after. Like you can martyr some of the people involved with Bitcoin, and I think that has already happened in the past. Free Ross, but you can't make the thing go away, which makes it a forcing function. When it comes to information, it's like, okay, the governments can't no longer sell you on a narrative. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's a forcing function on the failure of fiat money. It literally puts up a mirror and it says money can exist without inflation. How do you explain that away? You can't, right? Anyways, Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to say, like I commend, the CEO of Telegram and Elon for like fighting back. And I do think that, it takes courageous and brave men in order to set things straight. But I think at the end of the day, even they are susceptible things. Like imagine if Elon's kid had a gun to his head. It's like he would be
metaphorically.
Yeah,
metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
That was just an example. No call to violence.
If they were threatened, or there was threats in order to one of Elon's loved ones, I think you're more likely to get someone like that to cave. Like even if you were to metaphorically torture them, or confiscate their wealth, or do things to prevent them, I do think that there are ways to get to powerful people through their loved ones. And I do think that protocols, not platforms, is a way to defeat that. If you're like, hey, like I don't have Bitcoin that I can send because it's in multi-sig and it's across 3 different jurisdictions, or it's like, hey, I want you to delete this user off your platform, off Nostr. It's like, I can't because, I don't run the relays. I think those are ways to fight back of like, there's no longer a central entity or head to metaphorically chop off.
Yeah, this is all metaphorical. These are examples. We don't, none of this is a call to violence, YouTube. All right, everybody, let's get to the news. We have lots to cover. Let's check it out. Here we go.
Very special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet design with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
Everybody, go check out Passport by Foundation Devices. You can use the QR code that I'm going to put up on screen right now. Bada bing, bada boom. And you can use promo code SIMPLY. Get yourself a hardware wallet. Remember, guys, not your keys, not your cheese. This thing is incredibly easy to use. It's very nice. This is the perfect gift to give to someone who perhaps, they feel intimidated a little bit about taking self-custody. That's what the passport is for. It gives you all the benefits of cold storage Bitcoin, but it also gives you the convenience of being able to spend cold storage Bitcoin without needing this tremendous amount of technical know-how. Anyways, everybody, I do want to bring this up, and I think the central theme here, and I'm really curious to hear what David's thoughts are on this. And it's a very simple idea. Okay. The idea is you shouldn't have to become a part-time investor just to maintain your purchasing power. The idea, the fact that somehow, right, that somehow if you make a certain amount of money, you have some savings, you are forced to invest that money just to maintain not to increase, right, the size of investment, just to maintain your purchasing power is not normal. This is insane. This is crazy. There's so many different descriptions that I have for this. And what the secondary effects of that is that it overly balloons the financial industry, right? And I think what we're going to see as hyper Bitcoinization accelerates is you're going to see what Parker Lewis actually calls the great definancialization. So I'm excited to talk about that. I'm going to read a little bit from the article, but first, I'm also not the only one to worry about this. Apparently, Bitcoin is a great YouTube channel, by the way. BlackRock worried about people with digital Bitcoin wealth not using financial advisors. Let's check it out.
Hundreds of millions of people that are investing in these digital assets, but they're holding it away from their financial professionals. That these individuals are buying assets, holding it onto it themselves, and they're not allowing financial professionals to help manage it alongside stocks and bonds, to help them understand the tax consequences of these assets. Over 80%, 4 out of 5 millennial millionaires in the United States own crypto. So if you're a financial advisor and you're trying to get that next client of the future, you want to be able to offer your services to a millennial, a high-earning millennial, and you don't know how to talk about digital assets or talk about the value that you can provide as a financial professional with respect to crypto, it's going to be very hard to earn that trust and to earn that client. Hundreds of...
Okay, so let me just break down the conversation that just happened. All right, what he was just saying. I'm a cab driver and I dislike Uber. I really dislike Uber, right? Or I'm a horse and buggy person and I really dislike cars. Like that's really what happened. And the other, I'll put it to you simply, right? Bitcoin people are anticipating that it's going to have a 40 to 30% annual rate of return for the next 10 years, right? Conservatively. All you got to do is buy Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, mine Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into self-custody, and you're going to get that rate of return without having to pay a fee and all the benefits of custodying your own wealth. Why would I have to pay? Is someone going to beat that return? That a good return, just to kind of give you guys a perspective, a good return would be from for professional financial advisor would be 12%. If you take a little bit more risk, 20%, but they can't guarantee that year after year. That's like impossible, right? Bitcoin is doubling that, and you take self-custody, and you don't have to pay a fee for it. That's the problem that they have. But that sounds like a personal problem. That doesn't sound like a problem for the individuals. Here is a piece by Parker Lewis, and he explains it a lot more eloquently than I did. He goes on to say, have you ever had a financial advisor tell you that you need to make your money grow? This idea has been so hardwired in the minds of hardworking people all over the world that it has become practically second nature to the very idea of work. The line has been repeated so many times that it is now a de facto part of working culture. Get a salary position, max out your 401k contribution, select a few mutual funds with catchy marketing names, and watch your money grow. Most folks navigate this path every 2 weeks on autopilot, never questioning the wisdom nor being conscious of the risks. It's just what smart people do. Many now associate this activity with savings, but in reality, financialization has turned retirement savers into perpetual risk takers. And the consequence is that financial investing has become a second full-time job for many, if not most. Financialization has been so erratically normalized that the lines between saving and investing have become blurred to the extent that most people think of the two activities as being one and the same. Believing that financial engineering is a necessary path to a happy retirement might lack common sense, but it is the conventional wisdom. Over the course of the past several decades, economies everywhere, but particularly those in the developed world, have become increasingly financialized. Increased financialization has become the necessary companion of the idea that you must make your money grow. But the idea itself that you must make your money grow only really emerged in the mainstream consciousness as everyone similarly became conditioned to the unfortunate reality that money loses its value over time. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to circle back to my original question or theme. You shouldn't have to become a part-time investor just to maintain your purchasing power. All you have to do, buy Bitcoin, mine Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, put that Bitcoin into self-custody, and to use their words, watch your money maybe not grow, but watch your purchasing power grow over time without having to jump through all these all these hurdles. So I just find it interesting, and that seeing that video and then reading that article explains to me why I have 7 friends from high school. One of them works at Goldman, right? Wealth management division. And he's been the only one out of those 7 that I have not been able to orange pill. Now I know why. Right? So not trying to shit on that industry or whatever, but I mean, coming from a Bitcoiner, been doing this for 8 years, next year's gonna be my 9th year, right? Someone comes to me and they're offering me financial services. I'm going to look at you with my eyes like that and say, why would I do that? Why would I give you my money? And then not only give you my money and then pay you a fee for giving you my money. And I've seen this with high net worth individuals trying to liquidate their positions and put it into Bitcoin. The way they question you and guilt trip you, how you're trying to get out of these things, which is nuts. If you think about it, it's like, wait a second, isn't that my money? Why are you questioning me about getting my money back? Well, it's simple. No one's better than their incentives. Oh my God, I want to be nice. They're collecting rent, bro. They're collecting rent. Their incentive is for you. It's like the Matthew McConaughey from Wolf of Wall Street, right? Which is like, no, so they make your clients make money. It's like, no, that would make it real. What you got to do is you got to come up with another great idea, right? And you got to keep them, in the system. Well, anyways, I think I made my point, David. I was seeing some of your facial expressions. Do you have some thoughts on this? Because, like, in all seriousness, like it's not a jab or trying to shit on someone's career. It's just the reality of the fact that there are a lot of people like me that I'm for. What is a 4? I don't have any 401k, right? I don't have any of these things. I've built my wealth outside of that system. I'm not interested in, I don't need a financial advisor if I'm getting 40% year over year returns. Right. And even with Saylor's base case, it's gonna, he's making a case that Bitcoin will still outcompete the S&P 20 years from now. And instead of it getting a 30 to 40% return, it will get a 20% return. Where is the necessity for me to take that risk to give up custody of my wealth to someone else, and then they charge me a fee for that? Like, from my perspective, I don't see the value proposition there, right? So what are your thoughts, David? And then we'll push it on to Chris.
There are 2 things that prepared me for Bitcoin. I just wish they had prepared me earlier, or I had seen Bitcoin earlier, right? I have not been in it as long as you guys have, but as you're talking about this, I remember back to my 20s and have this like almost like PTSD of these conversations with these guys from like different, wealth advisor, companies with they're like, well, you just do this and you get this and you get 8% and just trust me, bro, everything's fine, right? We'll manage it all for you. And I just remember being in my 20s. I've got two boys that are both in high school now, but I remember when they were little thinking, you get this advice, you get these people that tell you, like in which by the way, one of my first ever Bitcoin events was actually seeing Parker Lewis speak. I had no idea how lucky I was to be introduced to him at that point, right? Being in Austin, he was with Unchained, all that kind of stuff. He's a genius. His book is incredible. But I just remember being told all those things and trying to do those things and follow the rules. And they're like, okay, you need 6 months of cash to pay bills in case something happens or whatever. I'm like, okay. So I would do that. And then like 2 years later, I would be like, oh, I just recalculated my bills and I guess my boys are getting bigger, life is costing more, whatever. So okay, I need to put more. So I had to put more money in, right? So I worked hard and I put more money in and I stopped spending money on other things. And then another year later, like, oh, it's the same thing, right? And it gradually happened, to quote his book, right? Gradually, then all of a sudden. And then I woke up one day and I'm like, why in the last 4, 5, 6 years have I had to double the amount of liquid cash I have to manage to cover 6 months of expenses? We're not doing anything extravagant. Bills have not really gone up, really, like we're not adding anything. I don't understand what's happening, right? So that was the first thing. That was the first thing that happened. And then the second one was when as a effect of that, right, from that cause, I started reading books on investing. And everything most of what you read is just regurgitating the same stuff that has sort of worked about 25% of the time over the last 80 years, right? And we are so ingrained in this. It's ingrained in us, this idea that, well, you got to put your money to work. You got to put your money to work. Well, no one ever stops and asks, well, why? Why doesn't the money hold value, right? That sort of thing. You don't think about it. So I literally killed myself.
Metaphorically. That's an expression.
That is an expression. Thank you for keeping me real on that one. I was just working another 30 hours a week in addition to my 9-to-5 job, reading books, watching YouTube videos, trying to learn about, how to trade options, cash secured puts, covered calls, all this stuff, and looking and due diligence, all this stuff. And it was brutal for me because I don't think that way, right? I'm fine with numbers. I love a good spreadsheet, but it was so convoluted and so difficult. It's just a fiat game. And so these guys came along and they're trying to help you play that fiat game. It's literally just because they don't want to put in the time. And it's not just because they don't want to put in the time and effort. They just want to live their lives. But even if they do put in the time and effort, most people can't really grasp and get this. And even if you do play it right, you're still only right about 40% of the time, right? And that's not always enough to keep you ahead of the game. So when these guys say, oh, well, it's poor us, we're not getting a chance to help these people manage it. We're like, well, you're not getting a chance to help these people manage it because it's not necessary anymore. Right? This is what happens when you actually have a hard cap money that's not manipulated. You can get this return, right? People don't understand deflation. And while I was trying to learn all that stuff, I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, right? And Rich Dad Poor Dad. He's a crazy character, right? He's got a lot of good and bad about him. Stuff I like, stuff I don't. But he's the one that actually planted that seed in my mind way back when, that he said, in a perfect society, money would actually be deflationary. He's the first one I ever read that line from. And I thought to myself, oh, but I thought, I didn't even know a lot about economics, but I was like, but I thought we had to have at least 2% inflation to encourage everybody to, so it's like all of these things, all of these mixed messages, and this huge industry that's just been on top of us for so long, we've been living in. It's not surprising that it's so difficult for us to step out and break free from that and take that risk. It seems it's counterintuitive to everything we've ever been told or ever learned at all. And the fact of the matter is, you are better off winning or losing if you take control of it yourself, right?
Yes.
You're responsible yourself. But we are scared to death to
Metaphorically
scared to take that risk on ourselves, right? And most people, this is why most people will never get Bitcoin, because they'll never want to do that. They want the FDIC, they want the fake, security. They want the false security, and they don't want to be held accountable for their own actions. So these guys
100%.
are worthless, not worthless, but they're no longer necessary. And once that fiat game really dies, it's going to be tough. But they're going to have to bring real value, or they'll have to go find something else to do.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and that is a big part of the U.S. economy, right? And you ask, like, what value do they provide? What do they create, right?
They just move paper money around. That's all.
And in the fiat system, you could say, oh, they're necessary because that is how high net worth individuals outpace the debasement of currency, right? But
we see Michael Saylor breaking that rule.
Yeah, in a Bitcoin system, like, I'm a millennial, right? And I'm like, dude, like, I can never imagine in a world where I'm looking at a wealth advisor and saying, maybe that would be a good idea. Like, and I know, and he mentioned it. He brought up the statistics himself. He's like, 4 out of 5, millennial millionaires in the United States, like, they're like, they own this asset. How do we convince them not to take self-custody is basically what he's saying. Chris, what are your thoughts on this before we move on to the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of piggybacking off what David was saying, it's like the whole system. Even when you look at like the billionaires, the fiat billionaires, the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk, you name it, fill in the blank there, they're incentivized not to sell their stock. So when you get to those upper echelons, what you're incentivized to do is put them up as collateral and borrow against them, because the wealth advisors are saying, if you sell the stock, you're obviously the largest shareholder or individual shareholder. If you sell it, you're going to put downward selling pressure. But a way that we can avoid that is you pledge them as collateral. We'll give you a 3% or 4% loan. And then, you want $1 billion, you pledge $1.5 billion worth of stock, over collateralize it in the fiat sense. And then they'll give you the dollars in your bank account for whatever business you want to buy, or yacht or mansion, you name it, whatever you want. You pledge the stock. But then you're at the beck and call of the markets, and like, hey, like all of a sudden there's a drop. We need to pledge more collateral, but we can't have you sell the stock. Like, we don't want you liquidate it into liquid net worth. Well, one, there's slippage and they probably wouldn't be worth what they are on paper. That's a story for another day. But, in the event that like you have so much debt outstanding, they change the rules of the game. Obviously, look at the 2008 financial crisis. It's like the banks messed up. In all intents and purposes, they should go out of business. Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns, ADP, like all these, or AIG, they all should have went bankrupt. But we prop them up with the fiat money printer, and we basically are like, hey, but now you owe us. Like, you're in debt, and the taxpayers bailed you out, but we bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. And it's this whole fiat incentive game where when you self-custody your Bitcoin, the risk and onus is on you, but at the same time, it gives you that privilege and that power to like go wherever you want. We see the jurisdictional arbitrage of people moving to UAE, to Puerto Rico, to El Salvador, to name a few. And if money goes where it's treated the best. And when what they're trying to do is they're trying to lock their money into their system, into their governance. And Bitcoin gives you the freedom to go wherever you want. So that's just my 2 cents.
It's not playing by their rules anymore.
100%.
Your own rules.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at 200 likes on YouTube, and there's almost 500 people watching live. So if you guys are enjoying the show, make sure to smash that like button on YouTube, smash that like button on Rumble, smash that like button on X, or give us a follow. And we topped out at 45 live viewers on the Nostr stream. So bullish on Nostr, almost 10,000 sats zapped to us. Really appreciate all the support over there on that protocol. Anyways, guys, stay tuned. We're going to talk to David about Bitcoin, energy, mining, all that good stuff during the culture. So let's get to it. Here we go. All right, everybody. I want to tell you guys about the Orange Pull app. Stack friends who stack sats. Join the 12,233 Bitcoiners that are currently on the app. To get started, all you got to do is scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. It'll take you directly to your app store of choice, whether that's Android or iOS. I don't know if there's another app store, but yes, and you'll be able to download the Orange Pull app. The Orange Pull app is the #1 resource for Bitcoin-only events. It also has a really clever geographical feature. So if you're traveling, you go to a new city, or perhaps you've been in your city for a while, you don't know any Bitcoiners around you, this is the Orange Pull app is for you. It will literally show you the Bitcoiners around you, and it will give you the capability to send them a message directly, establishing a relationship. It's one of the best ways to reach me. Don't really answer random Twitter DMs these days or random emails. If you want to contact me, you want to ask me a question, send me a message on the Orange Pull app. Download the Orange Pull app today. Stack friends who stack sats, scan the QR code, or check the link in the video description to get started. Anyways, I do want to open the conversation up, and I want to take advantage of our guest for today. We have David Branscombe. David Branscombe is a Bitcoin energy consultant. We just did a panel recently together over in Las Vegas at the Unconfiscatable conference. This is the last one, unfortunately. You know, very, very sad. I'm sure Tone's going to bring it back. I know Tone at this point. He's going to bring it. There's going to be a crazy bull market. I'm going to bring that shit back. So, but yeah. So, and we were on this panel together, and I believe the panel had to do with mining. And I didn't know a lot of David's background, and he was just dropping hot fire on that panel. I was like, I have to meet this guy. I have to introduce myself. So David, welcome to the show. Could you tell a little bit about what you do? Because you work with so many companies, right? What do you do? What do you do in the Bitcoin space? And a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've kind of done, I guess, before Bitcoin, I've done a bunch of different random kind of business development sales gigs. I bought and sold construction equipment. I worked for a nonprofit. I ran a consulting company for that nonprofit, business to business collections kind of thing. Did a stint at Dell. I was a technical sales rep at Dell. So I kind of have that technical background experience. But after the pandemic, I wasn't doing a whole lot, not a lot really going on. And I was building I have a koi pond in my backyard. If you follow me on Twitter, I post a lot of morning pictures out there. It's like my favorite place to have coffee and stuff. And I was building a raised grow bed. Just really because I was bored. I wanted to see if I could do it. And so I was building that, and my neighbor across the street came in. This was maybe, I don't know, early 2021, something like that. And I was mining a little bit of Bitcoin, but really just kind of on the GPU side, right? I hadn't gotten into ASICs and stuff. And my neighbor across the street came in. Turns out he was asking me about my project. Said, what do you know about hydrodynamics? So just what I learned here, went down watched some YouTube videos. Turns out he was the CEO of a company that was manufacturing immersion cooling in Austin, Texas. And I went to work for them as a VP of business development. They had closed a couple 100 megawatts worth of immersion cooling with Riot. And I went on, worked for them for about a year, selling a few more, maybe about 40 megawatts total, something like that, of immersion cooling. And that's kind of what brought me into the space. I was working with these guys I wasn't even really a Bitcoiner yet, but they just all assumed I was like, all in it because I was working in the job. But I just thought I was going to sell to traditional data centers. So that's kind of what got me into it. And every day I would just learn more from them, working with these guys, selling immersion, helping deploy at sites, things like that. I left Midas and consulted with for independent clients, building mines, built like a 8 megawatt air cooled and 8 megawatt immersion, 16 megawatt mine. Some nice guys from Miami kind of gave me my first gig on that, and I've just kind of been running ever since. Immersion is still kind of the focus, right? Basically vetting a project or just kind of making sure that the flow is correct and tweaking it to optimize that system. But I worked with a company really just kind of tagging along, really. I didn't like design it or anything like that, but I learned about off-grid gas site mining, where we're taking the gas directly out, turning it into electricity through generators. And that one really kind of got me into energy, and I've just kind of been slowly moving upstream ever since. So I can help out on all of the operation side, sourcing sites, whether it's on grid, off grid, behind the meter, whatever. But now I'm really kind of more focused on, sovereign energy, actually owning that power source. We were talking earlier about these countries that, are getting into Bitcoin, even at the government level. They have so much energy, right? You've got Chevron and Exxon here in the US. They waste, so much energy a day just because it's not possible to properly distribute it and things like that. So we're kind of at the forefront at this crossroads between money and energy. And it's a really exciting place to be. And I'm kind of living one foot in kind of both sides of that, right? I'm talking to the old school oil and gas, energy distribution, transmission. And then on the other side, I'm talking to these, cowboys. I know a lot of the different, pubcos personally, and what they're trying to do. And so I just like to be a part of interesting projects and work on different things and just learn everything I can about energy and Bitcoin and how those two kind of are intertwined.
Yeah, beautiful. And I want to focus on the aspect because it fascinates me, right? And I think Bitcoin mining is heading to this new era where I think it peaked in these major data centers, and now it's all about finding isolated energy pockets, because that's a major opportunity. And what that's going to do for local communities that are around those energy pockets, that perhaps those local communities didn't have jobs, they didn't have the opportunities, and Bitcoin miners just go in there, and all of a sudden it's like this new gold rush, except the gold isn't going to run out. I mean, technically 2140 eventually, right? But but there's still the fees, right? Which are going to be enormous. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because that to me, fascinates me. I originally got into the industry through mining back in 2016, 2017. I pivoted away from mining in 2018. Bane of my existence, highly regret it. Pivoted to media. That's worked out so far, but holy shit, mining since 2018, that would have been nice. But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that this is like a new era, and it's so exciting to me because it's going to give so much opportunities to these relatively small countries that would otherwise be relatively poor. They wouldn't have opportunity. We just had a presidential candidate from Suriname, and Suriname has a tremendous amount of energy potential off its coast. Right. And there, like that is a country changing type of phenomenon here, right? So could you talk a little bit about that, David, when you said sovereign energy? What does that mean? What does that entail for the world? What is that going to bring the world? is that going to make the world a better place, or are we going to boil the oceans in the process of mining all this Bitcoin?
We're not going to boil the oceans at all. The oceans are going to be fine. Even depending on what you think about climate change, right? The oceans haven't really changed very much. So I feel like we're good there. I actually had a chance to meet Maya briefly in El Salvador at an event. Anyone that meets her, talks to her, right, has got to be bullish on Suriname. These countries have been a victim of the fiat game, right? They may have had, if you look at really just the universe as a whole, let alone just planet Earth, we don't have an energy production or energy supply issue. We have an energy distribution issue, right? Same way we do with, food and things like that. There's plenty of energy out there. The rules and the blockades set up by governments and that fiat system wanting to control that energy source is what has caused the problem. So you talk about Bhutan, you talk about El Salvador. El Salvador took a huge risk, not just on Bitcoin, but energy in general. The geothermal energy that they use, so they literally create energy from a volcano, right? They pump water down, and it's this giant steam engine, and it's incredible what they're able to do, and it's almost perpetual. I mean, that volcano would basically have to go away for that to end, right? So there is plenty of energy out there. Bitcoin is the first technology that allows someone to go find energy that would normally be completely lost and wasted, and immediately transfer it into a store of value. So when I said earlier, we're talking about in the past, companies, but society as a whole, we had to go to where there was fresh water. We had to go to where there was, food, whether it be hunting, gathering, livestock farming, whatever. We needed all of this, right? Those locations are not always where the energy is readily available, as far as like massive amounts of power, oil, gas, even wind, solar, hydro, right? It's not always right there. We're at a interesting crossroads where that focus is being shifted away from that. We now have economies of scale that allow us to move further and further away from those sources and still be able to survive and provide for ourselves. And I see this migration now towards these areas that have been long overlooked, that have been ignored because of control or bad governments or terrible organizations that have loaned U.S. money and then basically used it to bankrupt countries. Bitcoin is a way to solve all of those problems and allow these countries to take that energy that is readily available there and make Bitcoin their number one export. Because it's finite, I believe there is no risk in that side. You just literally have to hold on long enough for everyone to realize that the best store of value we have is something that is literally backed by nothing but energy. It's not even really backed by energy per se, but the fact that it is through mining, it's inextricably tied to that energy. So if I'm going to send you Bitcoin or I'm going to receive it, I have to have energy. And then on top of all that, the value of that Bitcoin transaction from one location to another is literally the amount of energy required to mine and or make that block, right? So I've used this analogy before. I think I used it with you, Nico. If you were an Uber driver and you were to give me a ride somewhere and it costs 1 gallon of gas to go from point A to point B, the best way for me to the easiest way to measure and to pay you for that service is to actually give you 1.1 gallons of gas, right, in exchange for it. That would be the perfect way to exchange for you to know for sure that you are actually profiting. We created coins and dollars so we didn't have to carry around gallons of gas to pay for that, to make that exchange better and easier. And it was good for a while. But the problem is now we're using paper notes that can just be debased. So maybe going point A to point B, you may say, okay, that gallon of gas is $5 and I made $5.50 on it. But by the time I got to point B, that $5 will only buy, $2.50 worth of stuff from where I started point A. That's the problem, right? Because Bitcoin is tied to this energy and because of that finite number, it has the ability to change and shift the way we use energy, the way we view energy, the way we store our value, the way we use our time and save our time. So that time and that value together, Bitcoin is just, because it's tied to that energy as a proof of work concept, makes all the difference in the world. Without that proof of work, you have some other things, that are proof of stake, things like that. The dollar's proof of stake, right?
It anchors Bitcoin to reality.
Yes.
Because it's an energy-based money. And I think that a lot of the insanity and a lot of the decadence that you see in today's world is because the money is no longer anchored to reality. It's been completely disconnected. I think that's the power of the money printer. I think it makes people sick, spiritually, financially, obviously. But I think it breaks some people. I think no one deserves the power of the money printer. And Bitcoin, like it's a check, right? Because it's a reality check. It's like you can't just print more of it. So you have to mine it, you have to buy it, or you have to earn it, right? That's just the reality.
You can't fake it either, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if I go to the gym, you and I are at the gym, right? And I say, okay, we're going to put 225 pounds of weight on this bench press. You can either lift that or you can't, right? That's it. I have enough energy, right, and muscle power to move this bar down and back up, or I don't, right? Bitcoin actually works on the same laws of physics. So you don't have a choice. You either agree that 2 + 2 = 4 and that this many kilowatt hours are required to move this transaction from one location, the keys from one location to the other, transfer the ownership of that from one key to another, or you don't. And if you don't, well, you don't get to play in the sandbox. You just don't. You are literally, when you say, I don't agree with this, you are literally turning your back and stepping out of the sandbox, and you don't get to play. That is what Hillary Clinton doesn't like when she was commenting earlier, right? Because it's literally what it is. You have to play by the rules because it's the laws of physics. Energy is not created or destroyed. You can use it or not. And what's great about Bitcoin is it is the perfect balance of that. The value of a Bitcoin will only be worth whatever people are willing to use it for. And it will also only be worth whatever amount of energy people are willing to expend for it. Right. Yep. So you talk about these countries that are doing it. Okay. Oh, hash rate's going to go through the roof. Hash rate will always increase to the necessary amount for security. And then when it's no longer profitable or valuable, or someone tries to come in and play the fiat game, and they realize they're not playing by the rules, they will lose. They will lose they will go underwater. They will spend way too much on energy or whatever, and they're trying to play that hedge. They will get wrecked. It will happen. So when that happens, the bad actors, that's them turning away. They're turning away. They're kicked out of the sandbox, and everybody that is mining Bitcoin in the most efficient way possible, always looking for ways to be more efficient and tweak that process and just be as real with those numbers and those physics as they can. They're the ones that are going to win.
100%.
You have to have that incentive, otherwise it just doesn't work.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are getting to the top of the hour. Chris, I do want to give you an opportunity, 1 or 2 minutes, closing thoughts.
I'll just keep it short and sweet. Stay humble, stack sats. That's self-custody your Bitcoin.
Beautiful, beautiful. David, last words, last thoughts before we wrap up the show.
Not your keys, not your coins. Get off the exchange.
Love it. Love it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Simply Bitcoin Live for October 7th, 2024. I'm your host for today, Nico. This is my legendary co-host, Chris Alamo. And of course, our special guest for today, David Branscombe. Go give him a follow. I'm going to put up his Twitter handle up on screen right now. Anyways, guys, have an amazing rest of your day. Like the show, subscribe if you feel like we provided you value. And Opti will be in the hot seat tomorrow. I'll be traveling to Europe for Bitcoin Amsterdam. Hope to see some of you guys there. And of course, we'll be doing the show. Show doesn't stop. Honey Badger Media don't stop. Anyways, love you all. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace out, everybody.
Was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.